Okay. Right. So we're talking about Christian liberty today. Now I have it down as 1 Corinthians chapter 8, but it actually is a discussion that goes through chapter 9, chapter 10, and the first verse of chapter 11. So it is quite a long discussion that Paul is dealing with here. But it starts off with a particular question, a particular situation, and that's what we're going to be dealing with today. And what Paul then does after that in chapter 9 and 10 is he brings then an application to this situation, because when we hear about this situation, we'll go, that's not a problem today. So, but you know, what were problems back then are not problems today, but fortunately, we have the application of Scripture so that we can use it toward really anything that crops up. So, right, we'll get into 1 Corinthians 8. Now, when I put the Bible verses up on the screen, they may look just very slightly different compared to what it's been in the past, and that's because my computer blew up on over the weekend, and so I just got delivery of the refurbished one yesterday. So I've had to resort to other means and methods to get the text. But anyway,
not literally.
Huh?
Not literally.
No, my old computer, of which I had for 12 years, was basically saying, I want to update. And then it updates, and then it got the blue screen of death. So, you know, and it has this little sad face on it, and it says, we need to collect data. Just hang in there. Your computer has stopped. We need to restart it. And it gives you a QR code and gives you an error message. And then you look at the error message, and it says, you know, it was a page fault in a non-paged area.
So does the blue screen mean that that's a component?
Well, anyway, you then go through, generally, yeah, but anyway, so you're able then to backtrack and go back to a more stable state, but then the computer says, yeah, but I want to update. So then it updates again, and then it goes, you know, and yeah, so I then in my wisdom decided to try to reset the computer. And that didn't work. So then I tried to put it back to its original state, and it says no can do. So that was it. That was the thing. So I got a refurbished computer. So and the Lord supplied, the Lord blessed with an unusual gift that came. So anyway, so yeah. So yeah, I didn't have to go. I don't know, so I'm not going to go and find out. But anyway, so let's read some Bible verses here. So chapter 8. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to read through the whole chapter, because the whole chapter is only 13 verses long, and then we'll make some comments going back to it. So now, concerning things offered to idols, I'll just stop there for a quick second, because this is the third question. You know, remember back in chapter 6 and chapter 7. It was basically saying, you know, now concerning this, now concerning another thing, you know, and generally those things were about marriage and relationships. This is the third thing where it's saying now concerning things offered to idols. So the Corinthians had wrote to Paul and said, there's this situation, there's this problem, here's our mess, you know, we need help. So now concerning things offered to idols, we know that we all have knowledge. Knowledge puffs up, but love edifies. And if anyone thinks that he knows anything, he knows nothing, yet as he ought to know. But if anyone loves God, this one is known by him. Therefore, concerning the eating of things offered to idols, we know that an idol is nothing in the world, and that there is no other God but one. For even if there are so-called gods, whether in heaven or on earth, as there are many gods and many lords, yet as for us there is one God, the Father, of whom are all things, and we are for him, and one Lord Jesus Christ, through whom are all things, and through whom we live. However, there is not in everyone that knowledge, for some with consciousness of an idol until now eat it as a thing offered to an idol. And their conscience, being weak, is defiled, but food does not commend us toward God, for neither if we eat are we the better, nor if we do not eat are we the worse. But beware lest somehow this liberty of yours become a stumbling block to those who are weak. For if anyone sees you who have knowledge eating in an idol's temple, will not the conscience of him who is weak be emboldened to eat those things offered to idols? And because of your knowledge shall the weak brother perish for whom Christ died. But when you thus sin against the brethren and wound their weak conscience, you sin against Christ. Therefore, if food makes my brother stumble, I will never again eat meat, lest I make my brother stumble. So, the context of what's going on, because sometimes if we're new to the scriptures and we're new in walking with God, we happen upon these things and we go, what on earth is going on here? What is this even about? What is it about meat offered to idols, and why was that a problem, and so on. So anyway, what happened culturally back then, because it was a very, very pagan culture, is that a lot of idolatry going on, a lot of sacrifice of animals going on. So what would happen is they would take an animal, they would take it to the temple of whoever god it was. They would the animal would be dead, but not necessarily chopped up. Okay, so what they were concerned about was that the idol would then consume the life and the soul of the animal. Okay, so and then once they determined that happened, however that takes place, then the animal was basically taken down to the local butcher, chopped up and sold off. So and generally that meat was sold at a slightly cheaper price because the animal had already been used in a sense. So, but there was absolutely nothing wrong with the meat. It was, perfectly good meat. So, basically down at your local butcher, you had meat offered to idols, and then you had meat that wasn't offered to idols, but really, in practical terms, it was the same stuff. Yeah, yes, the little club card price, So, anyway, so people who were then becoming Christians, were then coming into the church, and then some were going, I just went down to the butcher and I got the cheaper meat. It was offered to an idol. Big deal. It's meat's meat, but other people were going, yeah, but that meat was offered to an idol. That's bad. Something must have, there's like an even devil in it or something, and, it's somehow tainted and wrong, because it's been associated with a bad thing. So there were people that were taking this position that I'm not eating that, because that's been offered to an idol. That's a bad thing. And that there was other Christians going, so what? Meat's meat. What's the, it's a good price, and there were a lot of eating rooms and community centers as such that were there, where basically what was being served at these, banquet houses, by and large, was stuff that had been offered to idols. And sometimes you didn't know what it was. You just ate what you're put on the plate, So, but, people then who knew what it was, who had this weak conscience, they were just going, no, I'm not eating that, and cross their arms and that sort of thing. So, so basically the question, I think, is, as posed to Paul, is it okay to eat this or not eat this? So, so Paul goes through then this discussion about how to handle this, because some people are going to come to a conclusion that it's wrong, and there's other people who are going to come to a conclusion that says it's okay. So, and neither position is wrong. Okay, so so there's things that we have, in our society today where, basically in and of itself, it's not wrong or sinful, but there are certain Christians that would go and question that and say, no, I think that's wrong, and a lot of that has to do with certain practices and clothes and things that, the Bible doesn't necessarily have an answer for. Okay. So, now.
You see that there, Woody? You see that last number 9 paragraph?
Uh-huh.
You could take meat out of that and put alcohol in there, because that's the way, isn't it the same thing?
It would be a similar thing, but because people would then argue, say, okay, I can take a glass of wine, it doesn't affect me because I only do that, I don't go and get smashed, because the Bible is clear about drunkenness is a sin, but it doesn't say anything necessarily about drinking as such. But there's an awful lot of prohibitions in the Bible about drinking, so in fact, priests were forbidden from drinking alcohol, period, because especially when they're in priestly service. And this is why I believe that at the Lord's table, if the Lord Jesus Christ was instituting the Lord's Supper, he would not have been using wine, because he was doing the most advanced high priestly exercise. So now there's some people that insist, no, that he was using wine. Well, the Bible actually doesn't say that. The Bible actually, Jesus talks about the fruit of the vine. He doesn't say wine. So, now, am I going to go and fall out with somebody over the head of that? We'll have a conversation, but and we'll agree to disagree. So, but I think this is where you have to sort of compromise a little bit and work with people. So. So that is one area. Another area I think is a bit of a bone to pick with certain Northern Irish people in particular is, do you go to the shop on Sunday? Yeah, or go and mow your grass, or something like this. So now, certain Christians would say, you shouldn't do that on the Sabbath, and I'm going, well, the Sabbath ain't Sunday. Sabbath Saturday. Yeah, this is true. So there is a principle that surrounds. Yeah, there is a principle that surrounds that.
I know you're a minister and deaf on that, and he would have given you a scolding if he thought you were working in the shop or something on Sunday.
Yeah.
I thought himself, you go on your holidays and you're away for more than a week. So if you're in a hotel for more than a week with somebody employed, get your bed and somebody.
Yeah, there's always a flavor of hypocrisy that's thrown in there. I remember one time, I had been tabled to go and speak at a meeting, and Helene and the guy phoned and says, about me coming to this meeting, and he phoned on a Sunday. Helene answered the phone and just says, "Oh, my daddy's at the shop." I never saw the light of day of that meeting. So and I went down. This is what happens. You run out of milk and you go and yes, exactly. Yeah. 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 No. So that yeah. So that there's things that happen. There's but where this can end up descending into is just sheer and utter legalism. Yeah, he's working away. So in the day that he takes off is Monday. So
You're an elder, is it not the busiest day of an elder's week or a deacon?
Well, I'm sure we're probably working around the clock. So You know, but anyway, so these are the kinds of things that's being brought up, you know.
Could I just
So-
throw one more thing into the pot there?
Yeah.
Not for argument's sake, Aaron, but if someone came to me, like, say I'm a Christian, obviously, but a drug dealer came and said, I want to give you £10,000,
Yeah.
and you should do whatever you want, I just want to give it to you, it's my money, I
Yeah.
have it. You know,
Uh,
I know that's, I'm throwing really kind of words here, but how would you feel about that?
I wouldn't take it.
Okay.
Yeah. So,
You know, the thing on a Friday where you get a phone call and if you win that.
Oh, I know all about that, yeah.
I did that and Ian says to me, if you win that, what are you gonna do? That.
I know. So,
Every single one of mine was-
Look, Starus has been offered money, you know, from drinks companies,
Yeah.
you know, to basically say, we think your work is good and we want to give you money. Now, this is coming from people that produce beer, wine, and so on. And we go, no, thanks, because that money is sourced out of a situation that actually promotes what we are against, you know. So, you know, so so you have to weigh things up, and this is what Paul is doing. He's getting people to engage about this as opposed to just talking, you know, just saying black and white, you know, yes and no, and so on. So, right. So this is this third question for Paul here. So, so it's initially about eating meat sacrificed to idols, but the greater topic of Christian liberty is discussed all the way to 1 Corinthians 11 and verse 1. So it is a big thing that goes on. And one of the questions that Paul, or statements that he makes, he pitches it in a statement format, but really it's a question. He says, all things are lawful, but not all things are helpful. Now it sounds an awful lot like chapter 6, but he says all things are lawful, but not all things edify. Not all things build up. And that says that in chapter 10. So, and that's part of his conclusion about things. He says, look, you know, there are things that are lawful, that are okay to do, but look at them. Is it helpful? Is it helpful to your brother? Is it helpful to your sister?
Like anybody on Thursday night,
Yeah,
on our stars meeting,
yeah,
you know, we're sitting there, you're sitting there with a glass of wine,
yeah.
and then you're trying to tell us, but that's.
Oh, yeah, sure. Yeah, yeah. So, yeah, that would certainly be hypocritical, you know. So, but you know, I have gone into secular alcohol units, and some of their staff would actually ask me, so what are you doing on the weekend? You know, assuming that what I do is I go out to the pub or the bar or whatever, and I said, and I've actually said, no, I don't do that. All of us within this agency, we're all teetotal. He's go, why on earth would you be? I says, but what is, you know, you as a staff member are going out and getting slaughtered on the weekend. What's that say to your clients?
Yeah.
You know, and there's no answer. You know, there's no, you know, you're looking at your guy and they're kind of going,
Disqualified, aren't you?
Yeah. yeah. So,
That bit was just got to be example.
mhm.
It means that somebody else who's viewing you may not have the same
Yeah.
idea as you.
Yeah.
And where you yourself might think it's okay.
Yeah.
If he has a different approach, then he's going to say, well, if he's a Christian, I don't believe you.
You don't know until you take your first drink whether you're gonna be an alcoholic.
That's true, that's true.
Well,
You can maybe handle it, but they can't.
yeah, and aside from that, you know, the bigger picture just about Christian liberty in general, I think it's important to actually sit down and actually ask people and talk to people and say, okay, what is your view? What is your position? Because you know, you could be an old stick in the mud and really not see your own blindness, you know. So Paul sets out the criteria right at the start here, and basically, you know, he's saying that you know, if you know stuff, but you know, knowledge puffs up, but love edifies. So, you know, knowledge about things needs to be informed by love. You know, so because if we're going to get on as a Christian community, and all of us have different positions on different things, we're coming from different backgrounds, different kinds of culture, different whatever, you know, we can end up throwing our knowledge in people's faces, or we can say, actually, I love you, so how can we work together? So the problem with meat sacrificed to idols in certain people's minds. So there was this disparity going on. Now, you have to realize back then, in terms of the societal norms, this was a completely normal thing. Eating meat sacrificed to the idol was not an issue. In Corinth, everybody did it. Now, does that make it right or wrong? I don't know. So, but I think because of association, this is where people were finding it difficult. It's like, oh, but that was used in a pagan context. So, I do think sometimes there is like when we moved into Straight Haven, our current headquarters up in Crumlin, Nuts Corner, wherever it is. I don't even know where it is. I go there every week. But anyway, that house was built about 20 years ago, fell into disrepair after about 7 or 8 years, and was repossessed by the bank. Okay, so huge 9,500 square foot property, sitting there derelict, basically, windows boarded up and all that stuff. The basement was massive. Okay. And now the electric was cut off, all that kind of stuff. People had gone in and, did the lead and did the copper, and, stripped the place out of all sorts of stuff. But the basement was huge. You know what was going on down in the basement? Raves. So there were people being bussed in. I mean, young people of hundreds were coming into the basement of Straight Haven and, and really doing the boogie thing, and, or whatever they do at a rave. So, along with all the drugs and the drink and the this and the that. And so they actually hot wired electric into the place. And, so there was a lot of bad things that were going on in Straight Haven. So, now we took a view. Now, all it is a building. Okay. So at the end of the day, the building is not spiritual, but there were unholy things going on there. So what we chose to do as a staff is we went through and walked into every room and placed our hands on the walls and prayed the blood of Christ into every wall to sanctify it, and set it apart for God's purposes, So, and we felt that we needed to do that. And I feel that the place is a blessed place of God, so, people that come on site, feel the presence of God, or they know a piece of God on the place. It was the same at Ballyards. We were in Ballyards for 21 years, and every last individual that came up that driveway always says, there is something different here. Now I believe that was because Norman Painter, who owns Ballyards, when he bought it, he went and got on his knees in every room and every corner and prayed God's blessing to come down upon the place, and
So I was on the scene, there's a lot of stuff done, sin done.
yeah.
And then, when God comes into your life and you're washed clean. So
Yeah.
so there is no unsavory stuff there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think there is a call for, cleansing it, sanctifying it, as it were, and this is why we give thanks for food, I believe, now, do you know where your food is all sourced from? No, so, and, do you know the farmer or the processor or who, no, we don't. I mean, we all troop up to Tesco's or wherever and get our stuff.
That's why it's Christians, we ask the Lord to bless it to us.
That's right.
Everything
So
goes-
then that is then sanctified. Okay. So,
Find out what you do.
well, I suppose you could, so, but, yeah, I may not, Came from Ian Brown's farm, that milk stuff, you know, so,
Right here tonight on the news.
I remember when your daddy-in-law gave us some, nice fresh milk out of the cow.
I'm sure if anything was wrong with church, we used to bring in the milk and
Yeah,
then that stopped because of TB.
That's right.
Remember?
so, anyway, so, but,
Of,
Mm.
the problem with the Christians.
it wasn't a problem with the unsaved. They were just blasting away. So it was because there was an association with idolatry, you know, and but what Paul is saying through this, he says, look, meat's meat. You know, it doesn't matter whether, you know, you eat meat or you don't eat meat, you know. So from Paul's perspective, Paul didn't have a problem with it, but he understood that other people had a problem with it. So he's having a kind of a meeting in the middle here, you know.
Like Paul doesn't recognize them gods because they aren't gods.
Yeah.
They're just idols, but
Yeah.
he believes.
Not all things the Christians are recognized.
Yeah, but he's trying to say that if he was sitting beside a young Christian, he wouldn't need it because he didn't want to be a stumbling block to the younger Christian because they think it's an idol, so he wouldn't need it at that time.
Yeah. So basically, you know, the question is asked here, you know, what is an idol? Well, it's nothing and has no power. That's what he's saying. You know, and basically it is what the world has. You know, things of the world really in spiritual terms they're nothing and have no power. So now that was Paul's perspective. Paul understood this. He says an idol's nothing. You know, they call them gods, but they're not gods. You know, because you use tools to make them, and you prop them up, and you put them on a pedestal, and you bow down to it. And can the thing do anything? No, it can't. You know, so you know, Paul had a mature spiritual outlook on the thing because he says it's nothing and it has no power over me. But people freshly coming out of those environments would be thinking they have power. There's something going on. Now, I believe there is a demonic spiritual undertone with many of these things. So, but Paul was, you know, he understood the reality of these things. So, because the devil wants to get us caught up in a non-reality, you know, he wants to get us caught up in bondage. So,
There's a good lesson in there as well too, that you have to respect other people's.
yeah. So,
because we do have people in churches who have, unless you see things the way I see them.
yeah.
it's
See, you know, I come from America, okay, as you all know, and see American football. All right, American football is played on Sundays, and there's more Christians as American football players than you can shake a stick at, and they have a tremendous testimony. And you know, now people over here would be going, "Let's play on Sunday," you know, and but yet there is a ministry and a thing that is being done over there, like it's like nobody's business, you know. So,
I think it's like for Christians is to use their common sense, really,
uh-huh.
and leave it of consideration for other people.
Yeah, and I think it is listening to their side. You know, sometimes we can be so pigheaded about our own angle and say, "Oh, that's my standard, so that is the standard."
It's just thickness at the end.
I understand people can be awful thick.
Everybody can have their opinion, keep it to themselves.
I have a bit issue with that. Sorry, I'm not keeping.
Yep.
No, it's okay.
Oh, you're all right. Okay, fine. Okay, well, let's go on to the next screen here. So, but then Paul talks about who is God. Okay, now he's someone and has power. Okay, the idol was nothing and had no power, and so now God is someone. And I kind of use someone there somewhat glibly, but because he's more than just someone. But you know, someone and has power, and guess what? He's for us. So and so Paul then goes through, and I think very rightly talks about the character of God. So he speaks firstly about the Father. And he does speak that there is one God too. So because the environment back then, the pagan environment was a pantheon of gods. There was Aphrodite's temple, and she was the goddess of fertility and sex and all that stuff. There was all demons. Zeus was the Greek head god. The Romans changed him to Jupiter and so on. And I'm trying to think of the
What you said is all like prostitution, wasn't it?
yeah. So the Romans renamed her Venus. Okay, so
Idols back then than there is now. Remember, we just have different.
well, I would say that in Western society, idolatry is a very different thing. We still have the gods of money. We still have the gods of pride, and we still have the gods of power, and those kinds of things that people dedicate their time to. So we have the gods of alcohol, and I've sat with people who have had their altar, on their coffee table of all their drink, and it's like they're worshiping.
All them because all them because these other countries,
Yeah. Yeah. Now, in Hinduism, there's 300 million different deities. So you talk about numbers of gods, there's loads of them.
Huge freedom.
But really, there's no power in that.
Oh, there's nothing there. No. So
African wood stuff and another.
yeah, my grandparents, they traveled the world and bought all sorts of trinkets and different bits and pieces. I mean, I remember they went to Nepal and they got a Buddhist prayer wheel, that had sacred texts within the wheel, and it had a little weight on it. And spun it around, and so I remember as a little kid, always playing with this thing, and you could actually take the lid off, and you could actually see, handwritten, really old scroll of stuff, and they had totem poles, and they had all manner of things from all over the world, and as a kid growing up, you're just like, oh, that's kind of cool, but then when you get older and then you're a Christian, then you start to look at these things and go, right, is it okay to have these things? So for some people, they need to get rid of those things because they are reminders about an old past, or about an old thing or a bad thing. Now, for other people, it's a decoration, and it's so I would imagine that, people could probably we could go into any one of our homes and probably find something that will offend us, So.
Them as a child with this big gold thing that was wrong with size.
Mhm.
And I didn't know what it was, but it ended up, it was, what do you call it, a Masonic thing.
Yeah,
And I remember going out to my brother one night,
yeah,
he said, get that out of your house.
yeah,
Just get that out, and I remember, I didn't know what it was.
yeah,
And I can go and actually give it to somebody, because I didn't know what to do with it.
yeah.
But anything Masonic's bad.
Well, and I do know people that are, in masonry and things like this, and and you have to be careful because you could end up cutting off your nose to spite your face, because you have to work with people where they are, and you trust God for wisdom about how to bring that out, So now I believe that Freemasonry is a cult.
Yeah.
I think people that are involved in Freemasonry are wrong. And we all know where Freemasonry sort of attaches itself with the various sorts of things that are big in this country, so kind of that have orange and thingy and black and purple and all this stuff, so anyway. So yeah, there's lots of things, but getting back to God here. So he's talking about God the Father, of whom are all things, and we for him. That is what is stated about the Father. And so basically, we are created for God and his purposes, and we have purpose. Talking to somebody the other day, and he says to me, I don't have any purpose. That's a very sad statement, you know, and there's a lot of people that believe that. They just believe that they're nothing more than a blob of goo that came out of the ocean. And, but yet, if you have life, God has purpose for you. You know, every one of you here today has life in you. God holds you up, and he holds you up by the word of his power. So therefore, you have purpose.
Very sad if you hear someone say.
Mhm.
That's just.
Yeah.
You
You know, people arrive at those conclusions because of bad relationships, their upbringing, how they were toilet trained. I don't know, you know. So,
My mother used to complain about them not well, and I used to say, "Come on, I'll put you in the car and we'll take you to the hospital about you people that are not well."
yeah, yeah,
And
I know.
you realize that you are,
That's right.
you know.
So, but you know, there's, you know, for me, when I look at that line, you know, of whom are all things, and we for him, you know, that just demonstrates such a personal attachment that God the Father has for us. You know, he is the only one that creates. We are the creature. Okay. Yeah, something like that. There's, where are we at? Yeah. I'm gonna have to get new glasses because I can't read anymore. I can't see anymore. I can't do anything anymore. So even what's in front of me is blurry, you know. So because God has purposes, you know, there's one of the verses I memorized early as a Christian, Philippians 2:13, that says, "For it is God who works in you both to will and to do of his good pleasure." You know, so, you know, how great it is to think that God actually works in us, you know, and it's to actually produce a purpose. It's his good pleasure. It's, you know, we experience his goodness, you know.
Because we know that. It's even more heartbreaking to hear somebody saying that they don't have any purpose.
Yeah.
So they would only accept
Yeah.
Jesus as Savior.
Mhm.
They would never say that again.
Yeah. So,
It's sad.
but often you hear Christians go, but I still don't think I have any purpose, you know, and, but it's through these studies, you know, and it's through getting into the word of God and the truth of God that you actually then find out very categorically you do, you know.
Wrong to say
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. So you're calling God a liar, basically, you know. So
I thought it was powerful with Liam praying on Wednesday night, that if the devil had his way, he would be all full of demons.
yeah.
I never thought about that before, and that is true.
Yep. So Jesus Christ here, it says in the Bible, through whom are all things and through whom we live. Okay, so there's two different lines here. You know, the first couple of lines about the Father of whom are all things and we for him. So there's two things going on about God's purpose. We have purpose, you know. So Jesus Christ here is saying through whom are all things and through whom we live. So what that would say to me is our purpose has been secured. Our life has been redeemed. We live exclusively through the power of Christ.
Hallelujah.
So because it is only through Jesus Christ that we are secure. And as it says in Colossians, and we are complete in him. Why? Because he, in him dwelt all the fullness of the Godhead bodily. And it goes on and says, and we are complete in him. You know, because Jesus Christ is the fullness of God, we are then complete. So, so we've been secured, our life's been redeemed, and we live, and I use this word exclusively, very deliberately, through the power of Christ, because it is through no other power. So, and I think, and what the devil wants us to maybe get sidetracked by is thinking, yes, you live through the power of Christ, and you'll need this, and and this is what happens within the Catholic Church. They talk about faith in God. They do talk about faith in Christ, but you add to it.
That's why I'm going to understand why maybe they're misinformed, but why Christians do things like yoga and reflexology and think that that's not spiritual.
Yeah, there's I know certain quarters, where there are Christians who actually, delve into that quite, and they try to set it apart as a Christian spiritual thing, but where those things are actually sourced from is quite Eastern, so a lot of but you see, and this is where terminology gets to be a little bit fuzzy, because you use the word meditation there, and we hear that word meditation and we go, oh no, that's a bad word, nearly, because we associate it with Eastern mysticism, and what Eastern meditation does is you empty your mind. Now if you empty something's going to come in. So, and this is the problem. Now, Christian and godly meditation is not the emptying of your mind. It is the filling of your mind and going over in your mind about the things of God. And you do that, then there ain't no room for the other stuff to get in. So biblical meditation, and Bible uses the word meditate quite a lot. Okay, so it's not a bad word. Okay, it just depends on how you define it. So and this is where the rub comes quite often, is what is your definition? I went Eddie, you remember that the marriage thing that you and Thing went up to Lisburn, and the question that was asked is, what do you mean by that? Yeah, so 6 words. What do you mean by that? So so in terms of the marriage relationship, sometimes we are talking on different sorts of levels. One person assumes this. Oh yeah, it was, yeah. So and then the other person says this, but they're using the same word but mean completely different things.
Say to your wife, what do you really mean by that?
Yeah.
And then it would start an argument.
Yeah.
So
It's not the same meaning, it's just express yourself differently.
so yeah.
Same thing when you're talking to someone in a different way.
Yeah.
And they're talking.
Like when I go and sit with people, I come from a certain background. I come from a certain kind of understanding. I do speak English, but my English may be a little bit different than yours. But one thing we do say, especially when somebody says to us, "Oh, you know what I mean?" It's like, well, no, I don't. Yeah. You know what I mean? Well, no, I don't know what you mean. Can you explain that to me? So, but
the big thing for me, what is it? If I say to someone, I believe in God, and I say, oh, I believe in God too.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, who God are you talking about? Yeah. So, yeah.
Yeah.
So, but I think it's very, very important here how Paul sets out this kind of structure for the Christian liberty thing. Is he's saying, look, see idols, they're nothing. Okay, they're of no consequence. See the meat that's offered to them, perfectly good, no issue, no struggle. What you do need to get in your head is who God is. Okay, so that's what he does here. So we need to look at the things on the earth via the creative eyes of God and the redemptive work of Christ. Okay, so because if you're not looking at things through God's eyes and through the eyes of Scripture, then you will get a distorted view. So, and it's very easy just to go back to all the old ways of which we dealt with things. So, because it makes sense in a strange sort of a way. So, but because viewing things through the creative eyes of God and the redemptive work of Christ is not a natural thing, you have to ask for this. You have to say, Lord, I don't see things the way you see things, but I need to see things the way you see things. So help me to see things the way you see things. And it says in good old Psalm 119, verse 17, it says, open my eyes that I may see wondrous things from your law. Yeah. So the Bible is quite clear that you have to pray this. You have to ask God for this. And when you ask God for these things, God will give it to you. So, because when the psalmist was praying those things in Psalm 119, he wasn't kind of hoping for the best and thinking, well, maybe God might do this with sugar on top, kind of, maybe. No, he understood the character of God very clearly, and he knew God was a opener of eyes. So, there's a video that I remember. I was preaching in a church in Cumberland, Baptist Church in Cumberland, Wisconsin. I was doing a series there, and the pastor showed a video from Brendan Heath, a Christian singer, and the title of the song was "Open My Eyes," and it was basically about this man sort of going through life, but needed his eyes open so that he could see the opportunities for the gospel and the opportunities to do good and all that kind of thing. And I didn't know that he was going to be, showing this video before I was going to get up to preach. And what I had to preach was on that same topic, So it was an interesting town, Cumberland, because they had fractional street names, meaning that the address of the church was 22nd and Half Street. And I remember traveling on 3.5 Street, and 3.5 Street went into a lake, but then you picked up 3.5 Street on the other side of the lake. And then I came across, what was it? 27th and 516th Street. Yeah. Yeah, no, I no, well, only in this town. There was all these just, really bizarre sorts of street names. It's like, and no, it's just a dead small place, Now, actually within a radius, I think of about 15 miles, I think there was 50 lakes. So it was a very lakey, sort of place. I mean, there's like thousands of lakes. They call Wisconsin the land of no, it's Minnesota, they say, is the land of 10,000 lakes, but actually Wisconsin beats it because they have 40,000. So anyway, but I just found this really, really bizarre. It's like, traveling along, and then you're seeing these street signs that say, Half Street, 3rd Street, and those, whatever.
Sorry, we go to the town kind of 40,000.
Yeah. So you want to hear something sad? When I was young, I was sick. And I was lying in my what we called the den, and so the den had a little false ceiling. It had little holes in the not the polystyrene, but that sort of that false ceiling stuff. I think I was 7 or 8, and I was bored. So you know what I did? I counted every hole, and I arrived at, I think, 31,000 holes.
You were bored.
Now, I did take a bit of a shortcut because I did, they were in a geometric shape. So therefore I was multiplying. So, yeah, so I didn't go 1, 2, 3, 4, so.
So I thought that.
Yeah. So it's they're lovely. So anyway, we do some incredibly sad, silly things. So
things they do is if you mocked about, they empty a sandbag out. You've got to pick every grain of sand up,
you put it back into the bag, read at the time and count.
Right.
Another one is you clean the 3 sets of stairs, you polish them with a toothbrush.
Uh-huh.
And the third one I'll remember, they take a dustbin. They put fat in it, sat in fire and burn it, and they give you brass up that you have to clean it, and then they sat fire again.
So was this a choice of what 3 things you could do, or you had to do all 3?
No choice.
Yeah, no choice. Boy, I'm glad I didn't go to the army. So, anyway. Right. So last screen here is about immaturity and love, because the person that is troubled by these things has what the Bible calls a weak conscience, but the person that helps them is the one who has love to bring them along. So Paul is demonstrating this, and so he then demonstrates this in practical application terms in the next chapters. But anyway, so a lack of maturity and weakness can bring uncertainty and stress to relationships within the church body. So and we see this, when there are new Christians, new Christians, make certain kinds of assumptions and assertions about stuff, and understandably so. But if they sort of remain in this, it ends up producing a lot of uncertainty and stress to relationships, especially if we don't bring love to the table. Now, what we end up doing is we bring knowledge and we say, you shouldn't be doing that. That's bad. What you have to do is explain why. So because people are okay with that. But if you just go, yeah. So
Do you not think, really, that a lot of stuff that people learn in life is the way they've been brought up and what their mummies thought and what their grannies thought? And my granny, you weren't allowed to knit, you weren't allowed to sew, you weren't allowed to do anything on a Sunday.
Mm.
And that still sort of rings in my head.
Yeah, sure. I can understand that. So I mean, when I first became a Christian in the 70s, I went to a certain church that had a certain doctrinal sort of pitch. Now, it wasn't wrong, but that's what I learned. And basically, to me, that was like anything else that you heard outside of that was wrong.
Yeah.
So, but that was because I wasn't taught how to assess things.
I remember growing up as a child, like you wouldn't even got a shop open on Sunday.
That's right. That's
They
right.
might be for a shop for an hour to sell them up and stuff. But
Yeah.
Things have changed.
See, in America, I mean, me coming to this country and all the sort of restrictions that there are on Sundays, I'm just going, gosh, we never did that. Because the only day in America that everything is closed is Christmas Day. So every other day, all the malls are all open and everything's all open, and they're open till 9 or 10 at night, and it's just how it is. So but anyway,
There's hardly a car about it Sundays.
That's right.
yeah, I know. So yes, because actually there was a Sabbath principle that was being applied, and because God knows that working 6 days and resting 1 day is good, that works. Yeah.
Realize it was a Sabbath.
Mhm.
They don't have pressure and people if you're a Christian person, you get it, you don't have it. It's not once you work in the Sunday, you don't work on Sunday, you lost your job.
That's right.
And your horses understand this too, because your horses wouldn't be doing too well if they worked every day of the week. Yeah. So so there you go. Yeah. So anyway, so knowledge with pride can bring division and a sense of a what I would call a multi-tiered system within the church body. It's like, I know stuff, you don't know stuff. So I'm better than you because you don't know, and I see this all the time, where the way people actually prop themselves up is they will go, self-righteousness, but they'll go and put people down.
Yeah.
So because they can't elevate themselves, they'll go and put people down. So, within the addiction circles I work with, that happens all the time. So, because people have no idea how to actually do things properly or right or whatever, so, but so we need to, pray for ourselves that, if we do have knowledge about things, and there's those of us that have knowledge about things, and praise the Lord for that, because God wants us to have knowledge about things, but do not have the knowledge about these things with some sort of arrogance. Because what that'll do is bring division and this, this multi, I know, so.
Right, you should also get that in church.
Yeah.
You get that for children, what schools to go to.
Uh-huh.
That is.
Yeah.
Big. When I was, a young Christian girl, that was a big thing.
Yeah.
What else?
People, people would turn their nose up, and people did turn their nose up when my job was in high schools in the academy.
Yep. I know. So, yeah, and there is unfortunately, we try to guard ourselves about those things, but yet when we do have somebody go to the academy, we go,
I mean, their children, they so.
Yeah.
Children.
Yeah. So.
Parents.
Yeah. So, but it's then, sometimes parents live their dreams out through their kids. If you weren't able to do something in your own education, you then end up trying to project that into, and I've seen that happen too.
I think it's Christians, we do need to take the boat out of our own eye.
Oh, absolutely.
Or we look to stack someone else.
Yeah.
And it's a lot happens.
Yep. So.
Can I ask you one thing that happened in our house with Philip? He played rugby, and he was picked to go to try out for the Ulster rugby.
Yeah.
And Ian said that the trials were on Sunday.
Yeah.
And Ian said, no, you're not going. And Philip was never forgive Ian for that.
Yeah, but I understand that, but this is where your Ian was exercising his parental prerogative.
Yeah, but did we do right? Did we do right?
Well, I think you.
Ian was right, because Johnny Jamison played for Olympians when torn and was representing Northern Ireland, and he didn't play. He wouldn't play because the match was on Sunday. And he was a believer in his
Yeah,
but
I just thought to myself, we done the right thing there.
Well, I think at the time you have to look at it at the time, and I think you have your own convictions about those things, and that was right for you.
See, Ian said to me, he said, you have to honor the Lord.
Yeah.
If you honor the Lord, honor.
Yeah. But Philip at the time was your son, and he was under your.
But he was not placed. He's still not.
Well, and
That's why when I was younger, it's pigeons, it's a bit pigeons now. The pigeons always come home on a Saturday afternoon, the traffic will be running on there after the pigeon. But it was a windy night, or whatever it was, windy, and they held the pigeons over. And the pigeons come home on Sunday. And Daddy was waiting for the pigeon in. And Granny was out in the tea top to come down. And he's not clapping it in Sunday.
Yeah.
And those principles, I remember those principles.
Yeah.
Don't do it on Sunday.
Yeah.
But to me, that's a bit like, your ox is fallen into a pit. Would you not on the Sabbath go and get it out? And that's a context thing where, yeah. So yeah.
I struggled for about 5 years with the very issue you're talking about. Should I race on Sundays? A lot of my races inside Northern last minute earlier on Sunday, and I love racing, I really do. But the thing that's with me was over the years, if you miss a Sunday and youngsters see that they're like, well, that athlete, therefore thinks it's okay, and then you're missing out on the community with God's people.
Yeah.
And if you're doing that, they're over doing a bike race like I was starting to do. There's absolutely there was no
but what you're doing is you're thinking the ramifications of that through, because that in and of itself may have not been wrong, but there's something that can spill over and say something to younger people or whatever. So you do have to look at the bigger picture, and this is.
Sorry, saying like get that pity man. Do you go and make a cup of tea on a Sunday? Where do you stop?
Mm.
Looking back, I followed him as a child.
Yeah.
He knew that there was a great respect. For that on something.
I think the rest of your ever know your normal job, the
Yeah.
rest have a bad rest.
So, anyway, we can go round and round about all these things, but now Paul does say this. He says this is very serious because the weaker brother is a person whom Christ died for. Okay, so sometimes we overlook them because we want to go and promote our position. And but Paul's saying, look, the weaker brother here, you have to be careful with them because they are somebody for whom Christ died. So that's serious when you put it into that perspective. So and then the activity is labeled as sin against the brethren, wounding of their conscience, and sin against Christ. See, when you let your knowledge puff up and you don't allow love to mitigate that and inform that, then Paul calls that sin against the brethren, wounding their conscience, and sin ultimately against Christ. That's what it boils down to. So, and then lastly here is this, the believer is to refrain from causing the brother to stumble. So, there are a whole lot of gray areas. There's piles of them. Some of us, a lot of us have our opinions about things, and some of them are rooted in scriptural principle and ideas and so on. But I think what's important is that, when you get alongside of the person that is, weak about these things, whatever that is, get alongside of them and help them, mentor them, show them the love of Christ and journey with them. It's because it's through that process that they will then mature. This is, it's not about, don't do this, do this. And it ends up just degenerating into a bunch of legalism. And church is full of it. So, yeah.
Because of that, and actually that stems from maybe coming into the church. Because do this, look like this. Yeah.
Yeah. So, there's a lot of things about clothes. Yes. Okay. That's all right. Yes. So see you on.
I think the lesson is not about what other people do,
It's
but that I'm not doing something.
Yeah.
That's going to offend you,
yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
even though it may not offend me.
Yeah.
What's it
Yeah.
for
It's
something?
being considerate.
Exactly, yeah.
Now, I remember a situation over in America where there was a guy that I knew that was a Christian. Some of the things and practices in his life were, could be questioned and that kind of thing. But he wore a yin and yang thing around his neck. Now, it's that little black and white circle with little dots things in it, but it was an Eastern thingy. And so I remember there was one guy, again from the church, who said to him, look, see the thing that you're wearing there that offends me. Now, the guy that was wearing the thing, could have gotten a bit pigheaded about it and go, well, I'm going to wear what I want, but he did see the man's point of view. And he says, yeah, I understand what you're saying. And I've never thought of this, that it is, even though it's about light and darkness, he was thinking it was about good and evil and, a kind of a, that kind of thing, which in and of itself isn't bad, but it's a symbol that is rooted in Eastern mysticism.
And saying you can't have the good side of all.
Yes, that kind of, so there was a conversation about it, and basically the guy then took it off and says, well, if it offends you, I won't wear it anymore.
The man went straight to the person.
Yeah.
He didn't go
Behind their back. Yep.
Yeah.
So that's a lot of that hoo-ha too. So anyway.
But there is a danger with the idea that you're can then dictate to the rest of the body, is there?
Yeah. Yes, because you could end up just having the lowest common denominator, which is then immaturity. So I think this is why Paul is trying to get this balance here and saying, look, really, the reality of things is that the idol isn't anything. It has no power, but focus on God because God is someone and he has power. So, and there's purpose in him. We have purpose. We've been secured. We've been redeemed, all those sorts of things. So really it's, because if you just get your focus on the issue, then you'll just be sucked up with the issue. So it's bringing, God into the forefront of this and saying, well, Lord, how do you view this? What we need to see with your eyes. So, and then once the both of you then get your eyes on God, then God will show you where to go with the thing and give you the right attitude about it. So, but the problem is that we like our immaturity, because
The principles have to be kept too.
I mean, I've seen in churches where a small number of people with very tight beliefs believe they're super Christians and everybody else is wrong, and they dictate to the church, people then almost, I'm not gonna call it, I'll just fall in with it.
Yeah.
Rather than exercising the maturity, tampering the immature person at all.
Yeah.
One of the saddest things I think in Christian life is someone see a 30, 40 years, but they're still a child.
Yeah.
That to be a so sad.
Yeah.
See, well, that would be me actually.
No,
Absolutely.
no, I don't think it's should not.
We learn that.
No, she don't.
See, for years.
You know those books.
But you open the learn.
No, you don't know.
Well, you open the learn. Some people aren't open the learn.
You will.
See, yeah, the thing is you want to be mature. So I think if there's a want to be, then you'll get there, now.
Wednesday night meeting, you wouldn't be there.
Yeah.
And we might not learn everything if it wasn't for your questions, Siobhan, so.
Actually, that's my